I'm Mitch from Beyond the Woods, and in the 4th episode of this series, I'll be comparing the effects between Fractal Audio's Quantum Firmware number 5 and the Line 6 Helix's Firmware number 2. Let's get into it. I know this video is really long, and you probably don't want to watch all of it. I will include timestamps down in the description and down in the comments for you to skip to the parts that you want to see. For my Fractal, I am using an AX8. However, it should sound identical to any other Fractal units that's on the same firmware, whether that's an FX8 or an AXFX2. I'm not going to go deep into explaining all the differences in their product line. You can Google that if you're curious. But just to quell any instant suspicions, this should sound identical to any other current Fractal product. Let's start by talking a little bit about their individual approaches. Fractal typically gives you a lot of deep editing parameters, so if you're someone who has a very specific vision in mind or is very technically minded and really knows what they're doing, that will probably please you. Helix, on the other hand, usually works a lot simpler, a lot like using an actual pedal most of the time. Both approaches have their merit, and I will definitely talk a lot more about this in the next episode in this series. But that's the main difficulty that I have with these two, because I don't have as many parameters that I can match to each other to give a fair comparison. It's not like the amp model comparison where I could match up, bass, middle, treble, presence. Like, most of those controls are the same across both units. But with this, it's a little difficult, and I'll address that on a case-by-case basis. So to break down the signal chain, I am using my 2003 Fender Stratocaster made in Mexico, completely stock as far as I know, except for, of course, a beautiful refinish to a matte surf green. That is running directly into the Line 6 Helix, which is running directly into the Fractal Audio AX8, going into the front end of my Fender Hot Rod Deluxe. It is an older model, the mirror faceplate one, not the newer 3 model that's black face and it has a different speaker in it. Yeah, that's mic'd up with the Shure SM57, draped over with an Automute sound absorption sheet just to kill any sort of room reflections that are going on out in the other room. Yeah, that about does it. I'll show you what I have going on screen here within the presets. Within the Fractal, since I can't run a ton of different effect types at the same time, so I couldn't have, 6 different drive blocks for each individual effect that I want to do, as I am doing with the Helix, I just have one drive block that I'm going to be switching between manually, and all the pitfalls of that, like the settings moving around, that'll definitely come into play during the reverb section, but I'll be switching manually between all the different types of models that the Fractal has, while on the Helix, I have them easily foot switchable, independent, ready to go out of the gate. And by the way, if you ever see on the screen view something suddenly switch without my hands ever doing anything, that's because the Helix has the feature to where it switches the view of the settings of the pedal that you're looking at without ever touching it. You can kind of just hover over it with your foot and it changes the settings, or changes to view the settings without even turning the effect on or off, which is really cool, and I'll touch on that in the next episode. But if that ever happens, that's why. Or if you start seeing a completely irrelevant pedal show up on screen, that's probably what's going on. Yeah, let's get started with the distortions. But first off, here is my clean sound. For the most part on this demo, I will be using neck pickup in combination with a middle pickup, because that's like my favorite clean sound and kind of a really good basis for any sort of effect. But for the distortions right now, I'm probably going to be sticking mostly to either full neck pickup, might switch over to bridge pickup every now and then, but here's the full neck. Let's get started with the BK Butler tube driver. There are 2 noted variants of this pedal. There's the 3-knob version and the 4-knob version. The Helix only comes with a single model, and we can assume from the picture and the controls that it gives you that it is a 4-knob. On the Fractal, it gives you both types of the tube driver. However, it's not quite as streamlined of an interface. It gives you tons of controls, as Fractal notoriously does, so it's not quite as user interface friendly, but it gives you both versions of the tube driver, and they sound very different from each other. I'm going to start off comparing the 2 different tube driver models within the Fractal, then switch over to the Helix. So here is the 3 knob set with everything at noon. In case you're curious what just happened on the screen there, whenever I do a foot switch on the Fractal, that pauses the editor. It's really annoying, and I addressed this in my X8 review, but in case you're curious on what was happening there, that's a 3 knob. Here is the 4 knob model on the same settings. Albeit a lot quieter, but also very different gain structure. I'll turn up the level there. Very fuzzy, a lot more gain going on. I'll back off the drive there just to see what that sounds like. Compared back to the 3 knob. Much more in-your-face mid-range, much more tasteful in my opinion. I prefer the 3 knob model on the Fractal. Now going over to the Helix, which if it is correct, or if the Fractal's correct, they should sound similar to, or it should sound similar to the 4 knob model. So although we can assume that the Helix model is a 4 knob, given the graphic that's given and given the controls that they give you, sounds a lot more like the 3 knob model in the Fractal. So I'm not sure which one sounds correct. I guess that's for you to decide if you are a valve driver or a tube driver user. I personally have not been bestowed with the honor of ever using one. I would love to, because I think these pedals sound awesome, especially in the hands of Eric Johnson and the like, but let me get that level match real quick. I'll pull that up to about 6-ish. Now comparing that to the Fractal 3 knob model, which in my opinion sounds a bit closer. Helix. I can't tell if it's a level difference. It just sounds like, actually, let me check. Sounds like the Fractal has a little bit more gnarly of a mid-range. I can't tell if the levels are just slightly off from each other or what, but they're both really good as far as the 3 knob on the Fractal goes. Personally, I think the 4 knob is kind of a far cry from what the Helix is doing, if the Helix is a 4 knob model. But yeah, I think that's about it for that. The general idea is pretty darn close to each other. All right, now for the Tube Screamer. This is probably the most important pedal in the world, so I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this. I'm going to try and go through the gain ranges and the tone range just to show you all the different sounds that you can get out of them and how they sound comparatively at the same settings, just because I know this is a very, very important pedal and it deserves a lot of time as far as this comparison goes. Even though it's called the T808OD on the Fractal, from my understanding, it is actually modeled off of a TS9, wherein the Helix is actually modeled off a TS808, as you can see from the picture. The differences, some argue, are negligible. Like, I am personally of the opinion that the differences between the two of them are not that noticeable, but if you're a complete tone chaser and a snub about these sort of things, well, first of all, I wouldn't expect you to want a Tube Screamer emulation out of one of these if you're a total snob. But if you're curious, if you really think that's a big deal, I guess that's up to you. But let's just hear how they sound with everything set straight up. Here's the Helix. Fractal in the same settings. To my ears, the Helix sounds a little bit more transparent. The Fractal kind of has this weird low thing going on, like in the bass range. Well, shoot, now I can't tell, but you can hear for yourself if you hear a very distinguished difference between the two of them. Gonna max out the gain on the Fractal just to hear how that sounds. Now over to the Helix with the gain gunned. Back to the Fractal. To me, they're both extremely, extremely close. Now I'm going to check out the tone range between the two of them. I'm going to drop the drive back to 5 on the Fractal. Let's check it out. I completely murdered that. Let's crank the tone. That's a very broad tone range. I think there's a lot of usable stuff that can come out of that. Back to the Helix. All right, now I'm going to compare the two with the drive set at noon, but the tone max out. Fractal has some more high-end information going on. I'm hearing more buzzing there. Not a complete far cry from each other. I mean, the gain structures are nearly identical, and I really couldn't tell these two apart. I'm going to do something weird. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm going to do the standard boosting setup that people run into high gain amps of tone at noon, drive at 0, level maxed out. This is probably going to sound sort of strange, but since I'm not running actually into a high gain amp, but if it sounds similar through a clean sound, we can assume that it would sound similar going into a high gain sound. So that's sort of my idea there. Gain lowered, tone at noon, level maxed. Yeah, let's check it out. This is the Helix. Fractal now. Well, this is the Helix, then I'll go to the Fractal. Fractal. So, I mean, that's not meant to be a realistic comparison between the two of them, but that's supposed to be slightly rest assured to the high gain players that use Tube Screamer models within their, direct patches, since a lot of metal players use amp modelers nowadays. That's kind of just rest assured to say, hey, you have a good boost pedal in both of these, at least maybe not necessarily good, but they at least sound similar between the two of them, so you can't be curious, does the Helix have a better booster? You get what I mean. Whatever. Let's move on now to the Arbiter Fuzz face. This one's a lot of fun. I'm going to set the fuzz to noon on the Helix. I don't know why it was set at 2.3. That was supposed to be preset otherwise, but hey. I don't know what I did. And then over to, where are you? Face fuzz. Set neutrally. Gives you clip shape, I guess. Okay. The level is a little bit higher on the Helix just for matching at unity gain. Yeah, let's check it out. Here's the Helix. Woo! All right, now going over to the Fractal in the same settings. All right, so where the valve driver, or the tube driver between Helix and Fractal is very similar as far as gain structure goes, maybe some slight voicing differences. Tube Screamer, basically identical. Now here, this is a very, very different story. The Helix, this sounds, what I think of when I hear this is sort of like an Octavia, except there's no octave going on. It's very, very brash, very in your face, while the Fractal... Oh, that was stacking. My bad. I mean, I'm equally critical of the Fractal, though, because it's not quite fuzzy in that territory. It seems more like an open overdrive. There's only a little bit of fuzz going on. Just barely at those settings. Let's turn up the drive just to see how that shapes things. Turning up the drive on the Fractal definitely helps to get things a little bit fuzzier. Let's go back to noon and do some lead stuff. So the Fractal's a bit more tame in relativity. Whether or not that is familiar or realistic to you as far as fuzz faces goes depends on your experience with fuzz faces and your preferences, I guess, but... Even with the fuzz control at 0 on the Helix, it is raucous and out of control. So in summary, I think the Fractal is something that's a lot more subtle. You can use it as a subtle overdrive characteristic if that's something you like out of your fuzz, while the Helix kind of really, really brash and aggressive. I know there's a lot of variance in fuzz faces depending on, if you're using silicon or germanium transistors in there, but I don't know if the difference is quite that broad. Real fuzz face users, let me know which one you think is more realistic down below. But yeah, let's go to the actual Octavia now. This one, I probably should have learned some Hendrix before I tried comparing some Octavias today, but that was my bad. This is just everything set at noon. Well, I guess the Helix only gives you 2 controls and the level is set down to 4. So fuzz is set at noon on the Helix at the very least. The Helix. Actually, let's put that level back at 5-ish. That's fine. Now over to the Fractal, which is set neutral. Back to the Helix. You can hear the Helix is doing this like angry, especially when you dig into it. While the Fractal is a lot more tame. Well, I guess tame isn't the right word. It's not quite as brash in the top end. It's still a very aggressive fuzz. Let's see if we can get it to that level using the tone knob. Even with the tone maxed out, it doesn't do that sort of sizzly thing. It's still very mid-range focused, even though it's a lot brighter when you max out the tone. Back to the Helix. Both sound really gnarly. Both are definitely doing that octave thing pretty well. It just depends on which one you prefer. Personally, I don't really have a preference. I mean, I love my fuzzes to sound super nasty, so I think I like the Helix for that. But then again, I mean, the Fractal gives you the controls to allow you to make it a lot more brash. Not necessarily even in the tone control, as I showed you, but you can use high cuts, you can do treble boosts within the pedal parameters themselves, while the Helix just gives you two knobs. So yeah, I guess it depends. I mean, I like the Octavia on the Helix for sure. It's just down to your personal preference in that regard. I wouldn't say there's a clear winner, not like in the fuzz face situation where the Helix was kind of one-dimensional. But yeah, let's move on to the Rat. This one, the actual pedal gives you a gain control and a level control, as most drive pedals do, and it gives you a filter, which is sort of like a backwards tone control where turning it up reduces your top end. The Fractal, to my disappointment, does not model the filter control. I'm not sure if the tone is a backwards filter control on this particular model. I haven't seen some actual affirmation anywhere to say one way or the other, but I'm going to treat it as such, and I'm going to keep that in noon, and I'm going to keep the filter on the Helix at noon. That's something I can really give the Helix credit for, is they are doing models per se, not just in sound but in function as well, while allowing you to have some digital functionality that you can't get out of the pedal in any other way. Sorry, I just tripped over my words there, but they still kind of stick to, you know, if you're an actual user of the pedal, you will still find a home with that pedal within the Helix model. So that's something I can really give them props for, but I'll address that more in the next episode, the ease of use episode. So here's the Rat. Drive is set at noon. Tone/filter is set at noon. Here's the Helix. Level's at 7.2, but I'm actually going to turn that up a little bit more, just for unity gain. Over to Fractal in the same settings. Fractal again. So as you can hear, the Helix kind of has this weird mid-range snarl going on. while the Fractal, while being still equally aggressive in the gain structure, I think they're both very similar gain structure-wise. It's a relatively transparent pedal voicing-wise. It's mainly just a big brash fuzz without, or a big brash distorted fuzz sort of thing without taking over a brand new tonal characteristic. So that's something I sort of like about the Fractal, but at the same time, if you like that really, really snarly, ratty mid-range, I don't know if it's actually characteristic of a real rat, but it... I mean, the Fractal's still really aggressive in the mid-range, but it's not quite as going on, at least compared to the Helix. So, yeah, again, depends on your personal tastes, what you want out of your tone. Let's move on to the Big Muff Pi, another fuzz pedal. This one is probably, or it's one of the most noted fuzz pedals of all time. Gonna start this with things set at noon. I know I'm probably gonna start adjusting things, but we'll see when we get there. This is the Helix. Very woolly, very low endy. Let's go over to the Fractal in the same settings. Yeah. Well, first of all, even with the drive set at the same setting, let's go back and forth. Fractal has a lot more gain to it. Gonna try and just level match these better. Compared to the Helix in similar settings. So yes, relatively, the Helix has less gain, a lot more mid-range driven, a bit more transparent of an overdrive, which is kind of funny compared to the fuzz face comparison, where the Fractal was a lot more transparent and mid-rangey, while the fuzz face on the Helix took on a brand new tonal characteristic that kind of flipped attributes in that regard when it comes to the Big Muff. I'm going to back off the drive on the Fractal model just to see. Even with the drive set that low on the Fractal, Helix still has less gain, even though that's set at noon. Let's see how gnarly this can get, though. Yeah, it's not good. The Helix is like on a similar gain level when completely cranked compared to the Fractal is at 1. So one of them's definitely doing something wrong, unless there's that massive of a difference between different Big Muff models. Personally, I prefer the Helix. It's transparent while still being nasty. You can still make it angry with the tone control. Like, it's a cooler sound in my opinion. That wraps up the distortion. Let's move on to modulation effects. Well, to begin with, there are a lot of parameters on here that you can kind of ignore. To begin with, I'll be utilizing the tap tempos to sync up their note rates, since some of them... Wait, let me see. Yeah, because the rate set on the Helix goes on a scale of 0 to 10, as if you actually have a knob that you're turning up, while on the Fractal it works in hertz values for actual cycles per second. So in order to eliminate that variable as much as possible, I'll be using the tap tempo actually to set it to a quarter note pulse, and I'll just tap both tap tempos at the same time to make sure we're getting at least very similar rates as I possibly can. So there are a lot of parameters here that are kind of easy to, or that you can ignore. The tempo sync and the note sync, that's basically assuring that it's going off the tap tempo. The rate is ignored because of that. Intensity, mode, lamp bias, spread, mix and level, of course, are the utilities, I guess, not necessarily controls on the actual pedal itself. But yeah. So there's just to say, it's not quite as simple as looking at a distortion pedal, because there are some other factors at play. But yeah, let's get into it. I'm going to tap out 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to try and keep that throughout the entire demo. I probably won't reset that at all. Let's start with the Uni-Vibe. This, switch please. All right, yeah, here we go. This is set with the intensity set neutral. Again, between these two units, there's a lot of variance between controls, because the Fractal, it's not pedal friendly necessarily. It's not for, you know, people who are used to using these pedals and want to have an easy to use substitute for them. This is complicated. It's not very friendly, and I'll touch a lot more on that in the next episode. But there's a lot going on here, but I've set it basically to factory neutral. Mix is set in the middle. The rates are the same because I tapped them out that way. Yeah, let's just check out what they give you. Actually, I'm going to tap out a tempo for this song because I like playing it so much. All right, now over to the Fractal, which is set neutrally as well. Over to the Helix again. Fractal sounds a bit deeper, a bit richer, while the Helix is a bit more bright. Both are very good, though. I think I don't really have a preference between the two of them. I bet both of them allow you to dial in either one as you please. Yeah, I'm not going to dive into any of the deep parameters here today, but both of them do a pretty good job at that. Let's do phase 90 now. This, of course, if you're not familiar with the phase 90, is a legendary pedal made popular by people like Eddie Van Halen, that rascal. This, again, like, the phase 90 is known for being a super simple pedal that you can kind of just tweak the one knob with, but when you load up a phase 90 on the Fractal, gives you a ton of knobs on the front page, and that's kind of a turn off in my opinion. But the rates are set the same using the tap. Yeah, let's check out. Let's start with the Helix. Fractal. Back to the Helix. Fractal. The Helix is a bit more watery, while the Fractal is a bit more deep and rich. Again, just like the Uni-Vibe, I don't really have a preference here. Both of them sound great, I'm sure. Right, both of them sound great. Yeah, both of them sound really good. This is, of course, the model of the script. Script logo phase 90, while the Fractal gives you also models of the block 90 and the script phase 45. So here, I'll compare those real quick. That's the script block. Then to the script 45. That's interesting. Less like it's kind of just more of a frequency sweep. But the Helix has a really nice watery character. Sorry, my voice is cracking all over the place. Please don't make fun of me. Has a really nice watery sort of thing going on. I think both of them sound awesome. It's kind of just down to your personal preference, as I've probably said a billion times over the course of this series. All right, this next one, I just kind of wanted to put a chorus in here because they both have like generic chorus effects that you can set yourself, but I wanted to do at least one chorus because it wouldn't be a very good effects comparison without one. But so what I have is the Helix models, the Boss CE1, the Chorus Ensemble 1, which is the older, it's an older Boss version, which is followed by the CE2, which is what the Fractal models. So it's sort of apples to oranges here, sort of speaking. I mean, they're both Boss pedals and they're both Chorus Ensemble pedals, but they're different generations, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on either of these, but here they are basically set to do the same thing. The note sync is happening because of the tap tempo. The mix is set halfway. Let's just see how these sound. It's not complete apples to apples, but you should get a good idea on if one does chorus better than the other. Here's the Helix. Now over to the CE2 on the Fractal. Oh, whoops. Here we go. Back to the Helix. Even though they're modeling different products, I think they sound very similar to each other. And I know I wish I could go more in depth on a chorus comparison between these two, but it's kind of difficult with, all the different parameters that there are to work with, all the different possibilities that there are. So that's really the best I can do as far as comparing apples to apples when it comes to choruses. But moving on, let's do the Uni-Vibe. Again, I wish I had learned more Jimi Hendrix before coming to do this. Oh, I guess this isn't Uni-Vibe. I already did the Uni-Vibe. This is an actual model of a Leslie, which again, this is a difficult one to compare because the Fractal. Oh wait, no, it's the Helix actually that gives you. The Fractal gives you a generic rotary block, basically, that you can tweak to whatever you want your parameters to be. It doesn't give you presets necessarily unless you use the block libraries. While the Helix gives you three different. They give you the Vibe rotary, 122 rotary, 145 rotary, and I'm not going to pretend to know what those are because I have not looked that up. But they allow you to do tempo sync, which I will do right now. So that's synced up to a quarter note pulse. Let's just see what they sound like. There are three different models inside of the Helix. Go through the three of those for you. Very organ-like quality. I love it. Here's the 122. That is super organ-like. I love it. Actually, yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, actually 145. Let's go to this. I don't know what I'm doing. But that's really cool. Just opening those up and you immediately sound like you're playing an organ. There's something really cool about that. It's instant take me out to the ball game sort of stuff. Let's go over to the Fractal, which is just a generic rotary block. Doesn't give you any specific models, of course. Sort of just sounds like a phaser when I first pull it up. And these parameters are so, again, I'm speaking as a brickhead guitar player. I'm trying to I'm not talking as a technical expert on one of these, and I understand that it makes me sound sort of inexperienced at times, but at the same time, I'm trying to speak as someone who is a user of these products, not someone who is an expert at using these and, already understands every in and out. I'm trying to act as someone who, just wants to create good sounds, wants to pull these up, and wants to make good sounds with them. And I'll touch, again, a lot more on these on the next episode in the series, a lot more on these things on the next episode in this series. But as far as this goes, that's the starting point that you're given when it comes to a rotary sound. Which to me sounds more like a phaser than anything. Compared to the Helix, which this is the Vibe rotary, just gives you that vibe. No pun intended. Wow, that's crazy. Ugh, stop. I'm tired of the voice cracks, but no pun intended, but it just instantly has that sort of flavor there. And there's something really special about that because it gives you a good platform to start tweaking off of compared to the Fractal, which it's not a bad sound. It sounds like a normal phaser. It's very high fidelity. It keeps all the top end, especially compared to the Helix, which rolls a lot of it off, but there's a learning curve there in order for you to get that sort of rich, pulsating sound. It's not immediately there when you pull it up. Like if we turn off the tap tempo and just... That helps a lot, actually, if you turn up the rate. Compared to the Helix. So actually, you can kind of ignore what I just said. I think it was a problem with me still using the tap tempo to determine the rate on the Fractal. But, still. Compared to... Fractal is just a lot more high fidelity, and I guess at this point it depends on your personal preference. The Helix has 3 really cool different flavors that are easily selectable for you, while the Fractal gives you this generic block that you tweak from. So yes, moving on to time-based effects. Going to switch up my setup, and I'll explain that now. All right, so I've changed the setup now. Now I'm running Strat direct into the front end of the Hot Rod Deluxe, effects loop out into the Helix, Helix into AX8, AX8 into the effects loop return, and now we're diving into time-based effects, starting with reverb. Basically what I have going here is all of the essential reverb types. That's spring, plate, room, hall, cave / cavern, and chamber. To me, this is covering a lot of ground and a lot of the critical reverb types that people look at. Of course, both units have other various types of delays, interesting spaces, like the Fractal gives you concert halls, specific recording studios, but today I'm focused on just the essentials, and I have dialed them in to be as similar as I can make them, just so we can see if there's a clear quality divide between these two. Obviously, you can dial them in to sound as tasteful as you'd like, but the focus here isn't to be tasteful, it's to make them, or to see if there's a clear quality difference. So what I have is no pre-delay on any of the reverb settings. The low and high cut are set identically between the two units. I don't know if the slope on the Helix is identical to that on the Fractal, but they're set at the same frequency, so it should be the same general sort of roll-off voicing on both ends. The mix is set to 70% wet, 30% dry, which is a little bit high when we're talking about reverb. In most instances, that number would be quite a bit lower in a tasteful scenario, but here, of course, the focus is on effect quality, so I figured I would turn that up a little bit to let you hear the reverb tails a little bit louder in comparison to the dry level. The level on the Helix blocks, it's going to vary between some of them because some of them just aren't at unity gain when you have them at 0, so that will vary, but it's, of course, just level matching. The big difficulty that I have when it comes to comparing these two on reverbs is the length of the reverb. I'm not able to match that identically because the parameters that each unit gives you, it's not the same. It's different languages. So on the Fractal, it gives you time in seconds and size on a scale of 0 to 100, while the Helix simply gives you decay on a scale of 0 to 10. So the lengths might vary. We'll see as we get there, and if there's any major discrepancy, I'll try and dial that in. But for the most part, it should be close enough, and it should be at least close enough for you to help decide, or close enough for you to decide which one sounds better if you think one is better than the other. So starting with spring reverb, Helix for the most part just gives you straight up like plate, room, chamber, cave, hall, like just normal, and then you can adjust the decay time from there. They don't give you a ton of different voicings. But with spring, it gives you a normal spring block and also a 63 spring, which I'm assuming is modeled off of a classic Fender tank of some sort. So I'm going to go ahead. Those are set to the exact same settings on the Helix right now. I'll go ahead and compare those. And just as a heads up for this entire time-based section, I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of tasteful playing here because the focus is mostly on reverb tails, and you can't really hear reverb tails if I'm noodling over top of them. So it's going to be a lot of chord hits, a lot of sustained chords. Hopefully that doesn't bother anyone. But yeah, here's the spring comparison on the Helix between the spring and the 63 spring, starting with the regular spring. Volume up. Obviously, 63 spring is quite a bit darker, quite a bit shorter. I'm going to go ahead and turn up the decay parameter. I'll do it to about 6.3-ish. That's a little high. Back it back down to 5.5. Much darker, much fuller. And this is set, the low cut and the high cut are set the same way on both the 63 and the normal, but back to the regular spring. So just inherently not even messing with EQs or anything. For whatever, if you see the difference between 324 and 320 hertz there on the screen, it's because on the 63 spring, you're not allowed to go into specific frequency. It's close enough. Don't freak out over that. But yeah, spring reverb, the regular spring at least, is quite a bit brighter, quite a bit more shimmery. You can determine for yourself. But now I'm going to go over to the Fractal comparison. This is using the medium spring block. For all of the comparisons that I'll be doing, it usually gives you, I don't know if I went over this already, but small versions, medium, and large for the essential reverb types. I'm going to be doing medium just because that's meeting in the middle. Yeah, here's the medium spring block on the Fractal. So the fractal relative to the normal spring block on the Helix is quite a bit darker. Let's see how it is compared to the 63 spring. Here's the fractal again. Pretty darn close, it's as far as I can tell. Seems like the fractal is dwelling a little bit longer, but of course, because I can't match decay times, that's something that can be dialed in. Let's check out just here for a second between the large and the small and the medium settings here with the spring reverb. You can see, I don't think it's simply an adjustment of time and size. I think it really is a change of the algorithm beneath it, but... Oh, sorry, that's the Helix. This is the fractal large spring setting, just the stock settings with a 70% mix. Is there a bit of pre-delay there? No, no. Compared to the normal spring block on the Helix. I'll go ahead and turn up the decay just to match that a little bit better. Oh, that's going a little too long. 5-ish. To my ears, I can't really hear a huge difference. Almost moved on without looking at the small setting on the fractal. Here is the small spring. Very rattly, very rattly. Relative back to the medium spring. Alright, now moving over to plate reverbs. Alright, so if you're curious, I have the low and high cut settings preset saved on the Helix, but on the Fractal, since I'm switching, I only have one reverb block and I'm switching between the presets. I'm basically taking the stock low and high cut settings from the Fractal and applying them to the Helix preset. Here we are on plate reverbs. This is the medium plate on the Fractal compared to the stock settings of the plate, or the stock decay time, I should say, of the plate on the Helix. I believe the Helix is quite a bit longer than the Fractal here, so I might switch over to large plate on the on the Fractal. All right, now over to medium plate on the Fractal. Quite a bit shorter. All right, I'm gonna switch over to large plate just to see if that's a bit closer. Turn off the pre-delay though. Back to the Helix. That's dwelling for a very, very long time. Turn that down to 5-ish, yeah. I think the Helix is a little bit louder. I'll go ahead and turn that up. Alright, I think that's good. even though their mixes are set the same way, the Helix does sound just a bit wetter, a bit more spacious. Voicing wise, I mean, I guess that's up to you as far as which one you prefer. That's the large pit on the Fractal. Over to the Helix. Both are pretty darn close, honestly, and like in the context of whatever you're using, whether that's in a mix or in a live space. I mean, I don't know exactly if you would be able to tell a difference in that regard. Let's go to room reverbs. This will be the medium room, starting on the medium room on the Fractal. Of course, I might adjust that. Yeah. Let's see if the levels are matched real quick. All right, I think we're good. Here is the Helix. Yeah. Those are really, really darn close. It's just, I mean, I do have the mix set the same way. I have it set to 70% on the Fractal and 70 on the Helix, but the Helix just seems a little bit wetter. I mean, wetter, I don't know if that's a term, but... I guess it depends on the algorithms that they're running. I'm gonna back the mix off on the Helix just to see if that makes it a bit closer. Ooh, level's a bit high there. Plus one-ish. Yeah, they're both pretty darn close in my opinion there. All right, hall reverb. The Helix is set to 3.5 on the decay when you first load it up. Let's check that out. All right, over to the Fractal. Now that's lingering for quite a bit longer. Compared to the Helix. Let's go to the small hall. Actually, let's start by turning up the decay on the Helix, because that's a bit simpler than... Yeah, let's go to 5-ish. Fractal's a bit quieter. I'll level that out here. Again, the whole mix thing, the Helix just seems a bit more drowned out by its reverb, even though it's set to the same mix level. Don't exactly know what's going on with that, but I don't think either one sounds that terrible. I mean, doesn't really matter what I think. I mean, you can decide for yourself. But to my ears, at least what I'm hearing right now... They both sound really darn close to each other. All right, let's do just the cave for fun. This isn't one that people use heavily, except for, you know, it's super drowned out, like whatever super spacey stuff. I'm doing the cavern setting on the Fractal, and it's called cave on the Helix. It's the same sort of idea. This is for the real space heads out there that love their massive whoa sort of reverb sounds. This isn't like a typical reverb type. Mixes at 70, no low cut, high cuts at about 5K. Kill the pre-delay on the Fractal. Yeah, let's check it out. This is the Helix's Cave. Keeps going and going. All right, now the Fractal. So yeah, moral of the story, they both can do that. So cool. Let's go to chamber. Medium chamber on the Fractal. Going to do level matching real quick before I go into the comparison. I have it running 6 dB hotter on the Helix. Let's... turn the Fractal up to 2, 3 dB maybe. They'll sound really, really close to each other. Helix just has a bit more low end, it sounds like. Kill the pre-delay on the Fractal, even though it's barely making that much of an impact. Kind of has more of an upfront mid-range on the Fractal. Wah, wah. Helix sort of subdues that. Thing about the Fractal, with its EQ section, the Helix gives you low and high cut for each and every reverb block. But with the Fractal, it gives you that. Not exactly sure if the slopes are identical, but it also gives you 2 parametric bands that you can apply to anywhere on the frequency spectrum to shape your reverb sound, which is pretty cool. I don't find myself using it very often just because I'm not a total reverb nut, but yeah, the Fractal, this is kind of an ease of use thing that I'll touch on in the next episode, but just taking a look at all these parameters going on. I mean, even on the basic page, it gives you stuff like low frequency crossover, stereo width, echo density. Like, that's relatively complicated, but then it also has an advanced section where you can control early reflections, late reflections, modulation, EQs, ducking. Like, if you go to Spring Reverb, it even gives you a spring section where you can choose the amount of springs that you want, the tone and overdrive on those strings, which is pretty out there. Personally, I'm never going to touch those parameters, but if you're a total tweak head, I guess that's for you. I think that about does it for the reverbs. Let's go over to delays. All right, for delays here, I have loaded up 4 different classic reverb types. I mean, obviously, both of them can do a digital delay. I don't think anyone is really curious about how both of them do at digital delay types. I figure for the sake of comparison, it's best for me to focus on their vintage models of delay units. So what I have is let's switch over to the Helix screen here, Deluxe Memory Man, Transistor Tape, which is an Echo Plex, and a Bucket Brigade, which is a Boss DM2. I've also set the parameters as close as I can to each other. With this, there is no curiosity as far as decay times go. They both work in milliseconds, which is a big victory here. Not sure if you can read that, but I have everything running at 300 milliseconds of delay because that's what the DM2 maxes out on. Feedback varies between the different units because on the Fractal, when you switch between different types. So this is the Bucket Brigade, this is the DM2. Going over to something like 2290, feedback varies a little bit. So with this, even like, I'll get into this during the comparison, but even if the feedback parameters on the Fractal and the Helix are identical to each other, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that their repeat times are going to be the same. It's sort of weird, but that'll be on a case-by-case basis. So feedback is going to vary. Not touching any of the esoteric sort of complicated controls. Mix is set at 50% because I kind of get weirded out if it goes any higher than that. It's not like Reverb where I was cool with it being at 70, but here my delayed signal is a lot louder than the dry signal. I kind of lose sense of what's happening. Yeah, relatively simple in that regard. Gonna start with the Deluxe Memory Man, actually. This is set on the Helix with 300 milliseconds of delay. I guess all of them are set that way. You can hear that sort of phasey, chorusy goodness going on. Now over to the Fractal in the same settings. So as you can hear, the Fractal has a lot more repeats going on. That's set to 30% feedback. On the Helix, it's actually set to 39% feedback. So even though that parameter is set higher than the Fractal, the repeat time, obviously the Fractal has a lot more feedback going on. So I'll go ahead and actually turn the Helix up rather than turn the Fractal down. Turn that up to about like 54. Hearing about 8 repeats there, going over to the Fractal. That's like 10 almost. I'll dial that back slightly. That's better. All right, 25% on the Fractal is like about equivalent to 54%. So that's weird. I mean, it's not a big deal if you only have one of these units and you're just trying to get the feedback right. Obviously, both of them would be able to do that. Just a little thing I find a bit curious. But as far as tonality goes, the Fractal doesn't have a whole lot of chorusing going on. You can hear on the decay, of course, it's not a complete analog delay. You can hear the high end is rolled off quite a bit. But switching back to the Helix, it's moving. You can hear that chorus, that warble going on. And this is where the Helix kind of has a win here. Because its controls are simple, you can really easily dial in, if you want chorus or vibrato on your repeats, the depth of those, and that's basically it. It's simple as that. While on the Fractal, I mean, I haven't dug deep quite into this particular pedal, but it's a little difficult to figure out exactly how you get that chorus, and I could imagine that would be sort of a turnoff for people who are used to using this sort of delay. So you'd have to go in and look at parameters like LFO, which is something most guitar players probably don't really know about in order to get the sort of modulation effect that you want out of your memory, man. Excuse me. So yeah, to me, first of all, the Helix just sounds great to me. For fun, let's just go over to the vibrato setting on the repeats. Just a different sort of flavor. While on the Fractal, sort of just sounds like a regular analog delay of some sort. So yeah, in my opinion, the Helix is, for one, easier to use if you're familiar with using a deluxe memory, man. But yeah, the Fractal, because it's so tough to use, it's kind of hard to dial in that sort of chorusy effect. Moving over now to, let's do Echoplex. This is the tape. I think it's just considered straight up tape on the Fractal. As you can see here, the parameters just grew another row with all this sort of complicated stuff going on. Not going to be messing with any of that. The mix is set to 50%. Here is how the Fractal sounds. Getting about 6 repeats there. Now over to transistor tape on the Helix. Very different. And again, I'm not saying that the Fractal can't dial in this sort of modulated repeat sort of thing. It's just a lot tougher to do. Like, I don't know how to navigate this thing because effects really aren't my thing, and I'm probably not an authority in this regard to be speaking on this, but just saying from a user standpoint, I'm kind of just talking as the everyday guitar player here. The Helix just has it. Like, you turn it on, that's what an Echoplex sounds like. Like, you can hear that phasing going on. While you turn on the mono tape, this is just the basic settings that you have on the Fractal. It just sounds like, that sounds like just a normal digital delay, and that doesn't have the sort of vibe that I want to go for. And to be perfectly honest, as a brickhead sort of guitar player, I don't really know where to start dialing that in. While with the Helix, it does get complicated. It has a wow flutter, it has a headroom parameter that I haven't really even messed with yet either, but like, it's not like the Helix is super easy to use, but like the Fractal, it's tough, and I mean, both units have their learning curves, but with the Fractal, it's quite a bit tougher. This is just a lot more feedback there, of course, but Yeah, I think you get my point. Just going to move on to Bucket Brigade. Both of them, at least call them Bucket Brigade. That's what BBD stands for in the Fractal. This is a Boss DM2. To me, this is like the quintessential rope delay by Foo Fighters. That song kind of like got me into rock. But all right, over to the Fractal in the same settings. A bit longer and a bit more feedback there. I'll go ahead and turn that down slightly. Turn down the level a bit. Oh, not that much. Let's do like 2.5, yeah. So despite the Memory Man and the Echoplex delays kind of being quite different from each other, Bucket Brigade is pretty darn close, so I don't think there's anything messed up about the Fractal. I think it's just a little tough to use to get modulation on the repeats, since it's not quite as user intuitive or, you know, similar to using the actual units themselves. But on something like this, where it's kind of just an EQ shaping, it's a bit more easy to use on the Fractal. I mean, there's still a lot of parameters going on, don't get me wrong. So personally, in summary, between the two, when it comes to like digital sort of delays, obviously both of them do a pretty good job at that. I mean, I'll load them up just for the sake of it, but it's pretty straightforward and there shouldn't be too much tonal difference between them as far as, I mean, aside from the feedback controls. Let's do simple delay on the Helix. So this is the simple delay on the Helix. And then digital mono on the Fractal. Like, there's no surprise that both of them can do that well. But as far as modeling vintage sorts of delays, which is the best way I can actually compare them as far as delay sounds go, Fractal is a bit tougher to use, and it doesn't inherently have that vibe when you first kick it on. That's something you have to dig deep and start to learn about the effect in particular to really get into. While the Helix, on the other hand, kind of just has it, and it's easy to use. So as far as delay goes, I give that one to the Helix. Yeah, I think that does it for the time-based section. That about does it for this behemoth of a video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, make sure to leave me a like or a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.